In 1982, a black veteran named William Billy Johnson disappeared without a trace, leaving his family in turmoil and his community in shock. For over 4 decades, the echoes of his absence reverberated through the lives of those who loved him, a haunting reminder of the unresolved pain that comes with a missing person. But in a twist that seemed pulled from the pages of a crime novel, state police recently made a stunning arrest, one that would send shockwaves through the community and reignite a long-dormant investigation. It was a judge, of all people, who was found in possession of Billy's dog tags, a chilling piece of evidence that would shatter the silence surrounding his disappearance. Billy Johnson was more than just a veteran. He was a father, a brother, and a friend. Described by his loved ones as a kind-hearted man with an infectious smile, he had dedicated his life to serving his country, only to vanish into thin air shortly after returning home. His family held on to hope for years, each passing day a painful reminder of the questions that plagued them. What happened to Billy? Did he choose to disappear, or was he taken against his will? The day he went missing, Billy had plans to visit friends. He left his home in the early morning, full of anticipation. Hours turned into days, and as the search began, the community rallied around his family, organizing search parties and distributing flyers. Yet, despite their tireless efforts, the case quickly grew cold, with the authorities overwhelmed and the leads dwindling. The years turned into decades, but the heartache remained fresh for those who had loved him. As time passed, memories of Billy became bittersweet. His absence was a wound that never fully healed for his mother, Clara. She spent years wondering whether her son was alive or if he had met a tragic end. "You never stopped looking," she would say, her voice heavy with sorrow. "You just learned to live with the emptiness." Then, in an unexpected turn of events, nearly 40 years later, a breakthrough came. A local police officer, reviewing old cases as part of a cold case initiative, stumbled across the long-buried files of Billy Johnson. During the review, they uncovered a shocking piece of evidence, a set of dog tags belonging to Billy, found in the possession of a judge with a reputation for questionable ethics. This discovery sent ripples through the community, awakening memories long thought to be buried. Clara, now an elderly woman, received the news with a mixture of dread and hope. Could this finally be the lead they had been waiting for? She felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. The decades of unanswered questions had taken a toll, but she knew she had to act. This was her son, and she would not rest until the truth was uncovered. However, as she embarked on her quest for answers, Clara was met with skepticism from law enforcement. Many had long moved on from the case, dismissing it as a tragedy of the past. "It's been so long," they would say. "There's not much we can do." But Clara was undeterred. This new lead was a lifeline, and she was prepared to follow it to the ends of the earth. The investigation would take Clara down a winding path of secrets and lies, revealing a web of connections that tied the judge to a world she had never imagined. It turned out that the judge's seemingly pristine life was marred by hidden darkness, one that intertwined with Billy's fate in ways she could never have anticipated. So as she delved deeper, Clara unearthed shocking truths that pointed to a hidden double life, one that would change everything she thought she knew about the people in her community. The more Clara uncovered, the more perilous her journey became. She would face not only the indifference of a system that had long overlooked her son's case, but also the unsettling realization that those she thought she could trust might be implicated in his disappearance. What Clara discovered would lead her down a treacherous road, one where the quest for justice would force her to confront the darkest corners of her community. As she pieced together the fragments of her son's story, she found herself questioning everything. Who had really known Billy and who had a motive to silence him? Through her relentless pursuit of the truth, Clara would come to learn that the answers she sought were buried far deeper than anyone had imagined. The twists and turns of this investigation would ultimately reveal a complex conspiracy that shook her family to its core. Join us as we unravel the threads of this chilling mystery, where a mother's love reignites a decades-old investigation, and the shocking truth about a black veteran's disappearance finally comes to light. Stay tuned as we explore the haunting case of William "Billy" Johnson, a man whose legacy was nearly forgotten, but whose story is destined to be told. The journey for justice starts now. Clara's investigation began with a single photo, one that had surfaced unexpectedly in a dusty box of old family keepsakes. It depicted Billy in his army uniform, smiling with a group of friends. But what caught Clara's attention were the faces in the background, particularly one man whose presence seemed too familiar. As she stared at the photograph, Clara felt a chill run down her spine. The man was Judge Harold McKinley, a respected figure in their small town. With this revelation, Clara's determination intensified. She recalled a few hushed conversations, whispers about the judge that had always floated just below the surface of polite society. There were rumors suggesting that McKinley had connections that ran deep, entangling him with various local figures. She wondered if he had played a role in her son's life, and perhaps in his tragic disappearance. Clara decided to dig deeper, starting with the judge's office. It was a daring move, but she felt compelled to see if any public records might reveal hidden ties between McKinley and Billy. As she pored over legal documents and case files, she found something unexpected. A sealed court case from the early 1980s linked to a property dispute involving McKinley and a family in distress. The timing aligned with Billy's disappearance, igniting a flicker of hope that she was on the right path. But as Clara began reaching out to locals who might remember the judge and her son, she was met with reluctance. People looked away when she mentioned McKinley's name, as if they feared the consequences of speaking out. It was as if a thick veil of secrecy enveloped the judge, shielding him from any scrutiny. Determined to uncover the truth, Clara pressed on, seeking out veterans who had served alongside Billy. Many were still haunted by memories of that time, and the stories they shared revealed a side of Billy that was increasingly puzzling. He had a strong sense of justice and was not afraid to stand up against authority when he believed it was wrong. Clara wondered if that very trait had made him a target. Days turned into weeks as Clara followed every lead, each one more tenuous than the last. Then, while attending a local gathering, she overheard two men talking in hushed tones. Their conversation hinted at a gathering of veterans that had taken place shortly before Billy vanished. Clara's heart raced as she realized that this event might hold the key to understanding what had happened to her son. But as she approached them, the men abruptly fell silent and turned away. Clara felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. It was becoming increasingly evident that someone wanted to keep the truth buried. With each passing day, Clara was drawing closer to the dark heart of the mystery, but the shadows were growing thicker, and the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. As she prepared to confront the judge directly, Clara steeled herself for the inevitable backlash. She had to believe that the truth would prevail, no matter how deeply it was hidden. The confrontation loomed ahead, and with it, the potential for revelations that could shake the foundations of her community. In the quiet moments before sleep, Clara often clutched the dog tags, feeling the weight of her son's absence and the urgency of her mission. Little did she know, the closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous the path would become. The haunting echoes of the past were ready to collide with the present, and Clara was determined to uncover what had long been concealed, even if it meant facing those who had long since forgotten the meaning of justice. Clara stood before the imposing structure of the courthouse, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the dog tags in her pocket felt heavier than ever, a constant reminder of her son's sacrifice and the unresolved pain that had haunted her for decades. She had spent countless nights researching, piecing together the fragments of her son's disappearance, but nothing prepared her for the confrontation she was about to face. As she entered the courthouse, Clara's eyes darted around the marble halls, seeking any sign of the judge, the very man whose authority had shielded secrets for years. The atmosphere buzzed with a tension that was palpable, whispers of gossip swirling around her like smoke. She could feel the eyes of the townsfolk upon her, some with pity, others with disdain. How dare she disturb the silence that had settled over the case? Clara approached the judge's office, her resolve firming with each step. She could hear muffled voices inside, laughter laced with condescension that sent chills down her spine. This was the man who had presided over so many lives, yet here he was, seemingly untouched by the pain his actions had caused. With a deep breath, she knocked firmly on the door. "Come in," came the dismissive voice from within. Clara opened the door, finding the judge reclined behind his desk, a smirk playing on his lips. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Johnson?" he asked, feigning politeness. "I'm here to talk about my son," Clara stated, her voice steady despite the tumult within her. The smirk faded, replaced by a cold, calculating gaze. "Your son was a soldier. He made choices, as we all do," he replied dismissively. Clara felt a surge of anger, but remained focused. "I found his dog tags. They were in your possession. You owe it to me and to him to tell me what you know." For a moment the judge's facade cracked, the mask of indifference slipping just enough for Clara to see the flicker of something darker lurking beneath. "You should let the past rest, Clara. It's better for everyone," he warned, his tone shifting to one of veiled threat. But Clara was undeterred. "No, I refuse to let it rest. You can't bury the truth forever. I will find out what happened to my son." The judge leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "You're playing a very dangerous game. Some things are better left undiscovered." Clara felt the chill of his warning, but she also sensed the cracks in his bravado. The fear in his eyes hinted at knowledge, a connection to the darkness she sought to unravel. As she turned to leave, a surge of determination filled her. She would not back down. She had come too far. Days turned into weeks, and Clara found herself digging deeper, uncovering names and places that had been forgotten by time. With each new lead, however, she felt the shadows closing in around her. Anonymous threats began to arrive, taunting her resolve and warning her to stop. But Clara pressed on, knowing that each step brought her closer to the truth. Then, late one evening, as she pored over old police reports in her dimly lit living room, she stumbled upon a name, one that made her blood run cold. It was a name associated with the judge, tied to a network of illicit activities that stretched far beyond her son's disappearance. Clara's heart raced as she realized she was onto something much bigger than a simple case of a missing veteran. But just as she began to connect the dots, she received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was familiar, yet filled with urgency. "Clara, you need to get out. They know you're looking into things." Her breath hitched. The stakes had just been raised, and Clara understood that the truth was not only hidden, it was protected by those who would stop at nothing to keep it buried. As she hung up the phone, a resolve like never before ignited within her. The deeper she went, the more perilous her path became. But she would not turn back. The truth was waiting, and she was determined to find it, no matter the cost. Clara felt the weight of the warning press down on her, yet she couldn't shake the urgency to uncover the truth. The name she had discovered lingered in her mind like a dark cloud, a thread that could unravel the entire tapestry of lies surrounding her son's case. With trembling hands, she gathered the scattered documents, her mind racing with questions. Who was this judge, and what role did he play in the web of deceit she was beginning to untangle? As dawn broke, Clara made her way to the local library, a place where the whispers of the past mingled with the silence of history. She knew the records held secrets, and perhaps within their pages lay the connection she desperately sought. Hours turned into an eternity as she sifted through articles, court records, and police files, searching for any mention of the judge that might link him to her son. Then, just as doubt began to creep in, she found it. An old newspaper clipping detailing a court case involving the judge. The headline read, "Judge acquitted in controversial drug trafficking case." Her heart raced again as she read the details. The judge had been implicated in a scheme that involved several missing persons, including veterans. A chill ran through her as she realized the implications. Her son's disappearance could be part of something far more sinister. Clara's resolve deepened. She needed to confront this judge to demand answers. But how? The authorities had long since turned their backs, dismissing her pleas as the ramblings of a grieving mother. It was time to take matters into her own hands. She began to reach out to local journalists, hoping to expose the judge's past and gather more information. As Clara spoke with reporters, a familiar tension hung in the air. Whispers of intimidation and fear permeated the conversations. "People are scared to speak up about him," one journalist admitted. "He has a reputation for burying anyone who crosses him." But Clara pressed on, emboldened by the support of those who believed her. With each interview, she felt the walls closing in around the judge, and yet his influence loomed larger than she had anticipated. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure mounted. Clara's phone buzzed with messages of warning, each one more threatening than the last. Yet she refused to retreat. Instead, she began to piece together a network of individuals who had encountered the judge's wrath, victims whose voices had been silenced for too long. Their stories were laced with fear and desperation, painting a vivid picture of a man who wielded power like a weapon. Then, in an unexpected turn, Clara received an anonymous tip. The voice on the other end was shaky, but clear. "Meet me at the old diner on Maple Street. I have something that will change everything." A rush of adrenaline coursed through her veins. This could be the breakthrough she needed, the missing piece that would expose the judge's dark secrets. As she approached the diner, Clara's heart raced with anticipation and dread. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air, a reminder of everything she had lost. But she was prepared for whatever awaited her. The truth was within reach, and Clara was determined to grasp it, even if it meant facing the very darkness she had been chasing for years. Little did she know, what she was about to uncover would shake her world to its core. As Clara stepped into the old diner, the familiar scent of grease and coffee enveloped her. It was a place she had frequented in her youth, a backdrop of laughter and memories now overshadowed by the weight of her search. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on a figure in the corner booth, shrouded in shadows. The man looked up, and their eyes met. He gestured for her to join him. Clara hesitated for a moment, the unease creeping into her thoughts, but she moved forward, taking a seat across from him. His face was familiar yet worn, bearing the marks of a life lived under constant scrutiny. "I know who the judge really is," he whispered, glancing around as if he expected someone to eavesdrop. "And I know what happened to your brother." Her heart pounded in her chest. "What do you mean?" He leaned in closer, the urgency in his voice palpable. "There are layers to this story that you haven't uncovered. The judge didn't just go after people in his courtroom. He had a personal vendetta, and your brother was caught in the crossfire. There's a reason he vanished." Clara felt a surge of determination. "Tell me everything." The man took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. "It started with a case, a man who was wrongfully accused. Your brother found evidence that could have taken down the judge. That's why he went missing. The judge couldn't let anyone expose him." Clara's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place, but more questions emerged. "So, where do I find this evidence now?" "The judge has it hidden. He keeps a safe in his office, a vault of secrets. But getting in there isn't easy. You'll need help, someone on the inside." Clara's resolve hardened. She could no longer rely solely on her instincts. She needed to play this carefully. "Who can I trust?" The man hesitated, glancing at the door again before he spoke. "There's a former detective, someone who got too close to the truth and was pushed out. He knows more than he lets on. His name is Mark Peterson. Find him, and he can guide you." As she processed this new lead, a chill ran down her spine. The judge had orchestrated a web of deception that reached far beyond what she initially imagined. The confrontation with the judge was looming, but Clara was acutely aware that she had to tread carefully. After exchanging contact information, she left the diner with more questions than answers. Each step felt heavier, the shadows of the past closing in. The stakes were rising and time was of the essence. Clara needed to find Mark Peterson, but she also needed to prepare herself for what was to come. The deeper she dug, the more perilous her path became. She felt an unsettling sense that she was being watched, the threat of the judge looming like a dark cloud over her quest for the truth. As she drove away, her mind swirled with the implications of what lay ahead. Would she be able to confront the judge, to unearth the secrets buried in his vault? The pieces were beginning to fit together, yet the danger was palpable. She could almost hear the echo of her brother's voice, urging her on. She was closer than ever, but the real battle was just beginning. Clara spent the next few days consumed by the investigation. Every free moment was dedicated to piecing together the mystery surrounding her brother's disappearance and the judge's cryptic involvement. She scoured old newspaper archives, searching for any mention of her brother, any reference to the judge that might hold a clue. Each article felt like a step back in time, reminding her of the pain that had been etched into her family's history. The more she uncovered, the more questions arose. Clara discovered that Judge Harrison had a reputation in the community, one that seemed to suggest a man of integrity, yet whispers of his questionable associations began to surface. Friends and neighbors recalled odd late-night meetings at his home, alluding to a darker side hidden beneath his polished exterior. Armed with this knowledge, Clara knew she had to confront him. She reached out to Mark Peterson, the investigator who had initially looked into her brother's case. He agreed to meet her, intrigued by her findings. Over coffee, Clara shared the details of the judge's involvement, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "Do you really think he could have something to do with it?" Mark asked, skepticism etched across his features. Clara nodded, her heart racing. "I don't know for sure, but I have to follow this lead. I can feel it in my bones. The dog tags. They weren't just forgotten. They were kept." "Why?" Mark studied her for a moment, then sighed. "If you're going to confront him, you need to be careful. The judge has power. He won't take kindly to being questioned, especially not by you." His warning hung heavily in the air, but Clara was resolute. The weight of her brother's memory drove her forward, an undeniable force pushing her into the unknown. A plan began to form. Clara decided to gather more evidence before approaching the judge. She reached out to her brother's old friends, hoping to unearth any memories that might connect him to the judge. Each conversation unearthed fragments of the past, stories of camaraderie, laughter, and camaraderie that hinted at something deeper, something more sinister. With each passing day, Clara felt the walls closing in. The closer she got to the truth, the more she sensed the shadows lurking just beyond her reach. Late at night, she would hear faint noises outside her home, a whispering paranoia that someone was watching, waiting for her to make a move. As she delved deeper, Clara uncovered a chilling connection between the judge and a group rumored to be involved in human trafficking, a connection that sent shivers down her spine. Could her brother have stumbled upon something he wasn't supposed to? Was his disappearance linked to a network that stretched far beyond their small town? With her heart racing and determination mounting, Clara knew it was time to face the judge. She had to confront him, to push for answers, to uncover the truth that had eluded her family for decades, but she also understood the risks involved. As she prepared for that fateful meeting, Clara felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The truth was within reach, but the darkness surrounding it loomed larger than ever. What would she uncover when she finally came face to face with the man whose secrets could unravel everything? As the day of reckoning approached, Clara steeled herself, ready to confront the past and unearth the truth no matter the cost. Clara spent the night rehearsing what she would say, her mind racing with possibilities. The judge, a figure of authority in their community, had always wielded power with an iron fist. How could she, a simple sister seeking justice, hope to challenge someone so influential? But the thought of her brother's face, the joy in his eyes, and the finality of his absence fueled her resolve. Days passed, and Clara gathered information on the judge's schedule. She learned that he frequented a local diner every Tuesday for lunch. It was there, amidst the clattering of dishes and the hum of small-town chatter, that she decided to confront him. As the appointed day approached, she felt a mix of dread and anticipation. Would he deny any involvement? Would he dismiss her as nothing more than a grieving sister? Tuesday arrived, and Clara took a deep breath as she stepped into the diner. The scent of coffee and fried food filled the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside her. She spotted him at a corner booth, his distinguished demeanor almost regal, but the glimmer in his eyes held a darkness she couldn't ignore. Her heart pounded as she approached, each step feeling like a leap into the unknown. The judge looked up, a bemused smile spreading across his face as he recognized her. "Clara," he said, his voice smooth like honey. "What a surprise." She forced a smile in return, the facade masking the turmoil within. "I wanted to talk to you about my brother," she stated, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside. The judge's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "What about him?" "The dog tags you were found with. They belong to him. I need to know what you know about his disappearance," she pressed, her voice unwavering. The judge's expression hardened, and for a moment, Clara saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear, perhaps. "Clara, you must understand some things are better left undisturbed," he replied, his tone shifting from friendly to warning. She felt a chill run down her spine. "Why? Because the truth might implicate you?" His demeanor shifted further, and the atmosphere thickened with tension. "You're playing a dangerous game," he warned, leaning in slightly. "There are forces at play here that you cannot begin to comprehend." Clara's resolve deepened. "I'm not afraid of the truth. I just want to know what happened to my brother." The judge chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "What if I told you that some truths are meant to stay buried? You could save yourself a lot of pain by stepping back now." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Clara knew she was teetering on the edge of a precipice, but retreating was not an option. "I won't stop until I find answers." "You can't intimidate me," she declared, her voice firm. The judge's eyes narrowed as he studied her, the mask of civility slipping. "Then you might want to reconsider your next steps, Clara. You have no idea what lies ahead." As she turned to leave, Clara felt a sense of foreboding. The judge's warning echoed in her mind, but she was undeterred. This confrontation had only strengthened her resolve. With each passing moment, the pieces of this chilling puzzle began to align, and Clara was determined to expose the dark secrets woven into the fabric of her brother's disappearance. Little did she know, the truth she sought would lead her into the depths of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond what she could imagine, and the battle was only just beginning. Clara spent the following days consumed by the judge's words. The sensation of being watched pressed down on her, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. She revisited the files, old newspaper clippings, and police reports, searching for connections that had previously eluded her. Patterns began to emerge, revealing strange coincidences and overlooked details that painted a more complex picture of her brother's life before his disappearance. One evening, Clara discovered an article about a local veterans organization that had been a significant part of her brother's life. It was mentioned that he had become increasingly involved with a particular group of veterans just months before he vanished. Intrigued, Clara decided to reach out to the organization for more information. Perhaps they held the key to understanding her brother's hidden world. When she arrived at the organization's office, she was met with a mix of skepticism and sympathy. Clara explained her brother's case, hoping to elicit some memories or insights from those who had known him. However, her questions were met with hesitance. Many members seemed reluctant to discuss her brother, casting furtive glances at each other, as if bound by an unspoken agreement. One elderly veteran finally broke the silence. "Your brother was a good man. He was looking for something he couldn't find." His voice was filled with regret. "Sometimes you can dig too deep, and you might not like what you uncover." Clara felt a chill wash over her. What had her brother been searching for? The words hung in the air like a warning. She pressed on, determined to uncover the truth, but the conversation quickly shifted. The veterans murmured among themselves, and Clara sensed a growing unease. It was clear that her brother's legacy was shrouded in layers of secrecy. As she left the meeting, Clara's mind raced with questions. Who had her brother confided in? What had he discovered that warranted such fear? She knew she had to dig deeper, but the thought of unearthing more than she bargained for loomed large. Later that night, she received an anonymous message on her phone. "Stop digging. You're not ready for the truth." Clara's heart raced as she read the chilling words. It was a stark reminder that she was treading dangerous ground. Yet the more threats she faced, the more her resolve strengthened. Clara decided it was time to confront the judge once again, to press him about the veterans organization and his connection to her brother. She needed answers, and she was ready to face whatever consequences came with seeking the truth. But as she prepared for that confrontation, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn into a web of lies, a conspiracy that was more intricate and sinister than she ever imagined. As Clara gathered her courage, she knew one thing for certain. The next step in her journey could unravel everything, and she had to be ready for the darkness that lay ahead. The following day, Clara arrived at the judge's office, her heart pounding in her chest. The air felt thick with tension as she stepped inside, greeted by the judge's assistant, who eyed her with an expression of concern. Clara asked to see the judge, and after a brief hesitation, The assistant relayed her request. Moments later, the judge emerged, his demeanor calm, almost unnervingly so. Clara took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation. "Judge Thompson," she began, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. "I need to talk to you about my brother's disappearance and your involvement with the Veterans Organization." The judge's smile faltered, replaced by a look of guarded surprise. "Clara, I thought we agreed to let the past lie. It's been decades." "Agreed? You don't get to decide what I agree to. I've found evidence that suggests you were more involved than you're admitting," she pressed, her determination igniting a flicker of defiance in his eyes. The judge leaned back, crossing his arms. "You're chasing ghosts, my dear. Your brother chose to disappear. Some people wish to leave their past behind." Clara's frustration surged. "He didn't choose this, and you know it. I received a message warning me to stop looking. What are you afraid of?" The judge's expression darkened, the warmth of his earlier facade slipping away. "There are things in this world that are better left undisturbed. You have no idea what you're asking for." Clara felt a chill run down her spine, his warning ringing ominously in her ears. "I'm asking for the truth, Judge, and I won't stop until I find it." As she turned to leave, Clara glanced back over her shoulder, catching a fleeting glimpse of something she had not noticed before, a framed photograph hanging on the wall behind the judge. It depicted a group of veterans, smiling, arms slung over each other's shoulders. Among them, she noticed a familiar face. Her brother. That single image ignited a whirlwind of questions. Why was her brother's photo among a group that included the judge? What connections ran deeper than she had imagined? Determined to unravel the mystery, Clara returned home, her mind racing. She sat at her kitchen table, poring over old news articles and documents related to the judge and the Veterans Organization. Hours turned into days as she meticulously connected the dots, her obsession growing with each piece of evidence she uncovered. But the more she learned, the more dangerous her quest became. Strange occurrences followed her, unmarked cars parked outside her home, shadows lurking in her peripheral vision. Clara's phone buzzed with anonymous messages that grew increasingly menacing, each one urging her to cease her investigation. Yet through the fear and anxiety, she clung to the hope that the truth was within reach. As she delved deeper into the past, Clara stumbled upon a hidden connection between the judge and a series of unsolved crimes from the same era. It was then that she realized her brother's disappearance was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. With the weight of this knowledge heavy on her shoulders, Clara prepared for her next move. She needed to confront the judge again, armed with the new evidence. But this time, she would not go alone. Clara reached out to a local journalist, someone who had been investigating the judge for years, but had never found the right angle to break the story. Together, they devised a plan to expose the judge's secrets, knowing that the truth was buried beneath layers of corruption and betrayal. Clara could feel the darkness closing in around her, but she was resolute. As they planned their next steps, an unsettling thought gnawed at the back of her mind. What if the judge had allies? What if he would stop at nothing to protect himself? The investigation was becoming a game of cat and mouse, and Clara knew she had to be careful. In the shadow of danger, Clara braced herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. The truth was waiting, but it was cloaked in peril, and she was now on a collision course with the dark forces that had conspired to keep her brother's fate hidden. Clara and the journalist Mark set a date to confront the judge, both feeling the weight of anticipation and anxiety. They agreed to meet at a local diner, a place where the judge often frequented. The diner was a modest establishment, filled with the comforting aroma of coffee and pancakes, but the atmosphere felt tense with the underlying threat of their mission. As they sat in a secluded booth, Clara reviewed her notes, detailing everything they had uncovered so far. The judge's questionable past, his possible connections to the disappearance, and the dog tags found in his possession were all on the table. Mark listened intently, taking notes, his investigative instincts kicking into high gear. Clara's heart raced as she thought about what they were about to do. She knew the judge had a reputation, powerful, untouchable, but beneath that facade was a man who had evaded justice for far too long. It was this knowledge that fueled her determination. On the day of the confrontation, Clara's stomach churned with a mix of fear and resolve. They arrived at the judge's office, a grand building that loomed over the street, an architectural embodiment of his authority. Clara could feel the weight of every step she took as they approached the imposing entrance. With each heartbeat, Clara's mind raced. What if the judge denied everything? What if he threatened them? The thought of being silenced sent shivers down her spine, but the urgency of finding her brother outweighed her fears. They were not just there to confront the judge, they were there to unearth the truth. Inside the office, the judge was uncharacteristically calm as he greeted them. He wore a practiced smile, but Clara could see a flicker of something darker lurking beneath. It was as if he knew exactly why they were there. The tension in the room was palpable as Clara laid out the evidence, her voice steady but her heart pounding. "We found your dog tags," she said, her eyes locked onto his. "They were discovered near the old military base where my brother went missing." The judge's smile faded, replaced by a mask of irritation. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he replied, his voice low and controlled. Clara pressed on, her voice gaining strength. "You were involved, weren't you? You knew something about his disappearance and you've been hiding it all these years." For a moment, the room was silent, the only sound the distant hum of the city outside. Clara could see the judge's demeanor shift, the facade of confidence cracking just enough to reveal a flicker of fear. Just then, Clara felt a surge of adrenaline. She was standing on the precipice of a revelation, and she could sense that the truth was close. But then the unexpected happened. A sharp knock echoed from the door, interrupting the standoff. The judge's expression transformed, a flash of panic crossing his face. Clara's heart raced at the sight. This was not just a confrontation, it was becoming a critical moment in her search for justice. As the door opened, Clara braced herself for whatever came next. She could feel the weight of the truth hanging in the balance, ready to spill out. But the stakes had just been raised higher than she ever anticipated. As the door swung open, Clara's breath caught in her throat. Standing in the doorway was a man she recognized from her past, Detective Mark Stevens, the very investigator who had been assigned to her husband's case all those years ago. His weary eyes met hers, and in that moment it was as if time collapsed. The years of searching, of unanswered questions, all rushed back like a tide threatening to overwhelm her. "Clara," he said, his voice steady yet laced with the weight of unsaid words. "We need to talk." The judge's expression turned from irritation to pure disdain. "I have nothing to say to you, Stevens. This is not your case anymore." But Detective Stevens stepped into the room, his presence demanding attention. "It is if it's related to another lead we just received." Clara's heart raced again. What could this new lead possibly mean? The detective's eyes flicked to her, a silent understanding passing between them. He knew the judge had been hiding something, and now it felt like the walls were finally beginning to crack. "Judge, this is about the photograph," Stevens continued, his tone authoritative. "The one that was found in that abandoned warehouse last week. It changes everything." Clara's stomach dropped. The photograph had been a turning point in her investigation, a clue that hinted at a deeper mystery. What had initially seemed like a simple image of her husband had morphed into a tangled web of connections she had yet to untangle. The judge's face paled, and his composure began to slip. "That photograph doesn't mean anything. It's just a piece of paper." "Is it?" Clara interjected, her voice steady, emboldened by the detective's presence. "Because I think it speaks volumes about the life my husband was living and the secrets you've been keeping." With a sudden flash of anger, the judge snapped, "You have no idea what you're meddling in. This is bigger than you think." Clara's pulse quickened. The judge's outburst was the crack in the armor she had been waiting for. "Then enlighten me. If it's so big, why are you so scared?" Before the judge could respond, Detective Stevens took a step closer, a grim look etched on his face. "Clara, what we uncovered suggests that your husband wasn't just a victim of circumstance. There are ties to something far more sinister, an underground network that spans across this city." Clara's mind reeled. The pieces were finally starting to fit together. "A network? What are you saying?" "There are rumors of a double life. Your husband may have been involved in something dangerous, something that might have led to his disappearance," Stevens explained, his voice low and serious. Clara felt her world tilt. Her husband, a man she thought she knew so well, entangled in a criminal conspiracy? It was hard to reconcile. But why didn't anyone tell me? Why wasn't I involved in this investigation? It was buried, Clara, Stevens replied, his tone sincere. It was easier to disregard the case than to confront the implications of what he might have been involved in, but we believe the judge knows more than he's let on. Clara turned her gaze back to the judge, who stood rigid, his facade finally cracking under the pressure. You're not innocent in this, are you? You were supposed to protect us. The judge's silence spoke volumes, the weight of his guilt pressing heavily against the room. Clara felt a mix of rage and determination swell within her. She had come too far to back down now. Whatever he was involved in, I will uncover it, she vowed, her voice rising with conviction. This isn't just about finding my husband anymore. This is about uncovering the truth, no matter how dark it may be. And as the tension in the room reached a boiling point, Clara realized that she was no longer just a grieving widow. She was a force to be reckoned with, ready to dive into the depths of deception that surrounded her husband's disappearance and confront those who had hidden the truth for far too long. With renewed determination, Clara shifted her focus away from the judge and onto the evidence she had gathered. The dog tags held in her possession were more than just a memory. They were a key to unlocking the secrets of her husband's last days. She began meticulously reviewing every detail, every connection that might lead her closer to the truth. Clara reached out to the few friends and fellow veterans her husband had kept in touch with before his disappearance. Each conversation was a small step forward, but also a reminder of the years lost to silence. Many of them spoke in hushed tones, wary of the implications of discussing the past. Some hinted at shadows lurking in the corners of their memories, faint whispers of an underground operation involving drugs and stolen military equipment that her husband might have stumbled upon. Determined to follow this lead, Clara contacted local records offices, hunting for any documentation that might corroborate the stories. She pored over old police reports, military records, and newspaper clippings from 1982, piecing together a narrative that painted a grim picture of a man caught in a web far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. As she dug deeper, Clara's phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from a source she had only just begun to trust, a former investigator who had worked on her husband's case. "Meet me at the diner on 5th, the text read. "I have something you need to see." Her heart raced as she made her way to the diner, a place that felt like a portal to the past, where the weight of time pressed down on the cracked vinyl booths and faded photographs on the walls. Clara sat in a booth, her eyes scanning the entrance for the investigator. When he arrived, he looked around cautiously before sliding into the seat opposite her. "I've found something," he said, his voice low and urgent. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, some old and faded, showing her husband in the company of several men. Strangers whose faces were now familiar to Clara as whispers of their connections to the judge began to materialize. "Who are they?" she asked, feeling the weight of her discovery deepening. "People who had a stake in whatever operation was happening. Your husband might have known too much. This could explain why he disappeared." Clara's mind raced as she processed the implications. There was a murky world of corruption and betrayal that her husband had unwittingly stepped into. But she needed more than just photographs. She needed proof. As she began to formulate a plan to confront the judge once more, Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. The more she uncovered, the more danger she sensed lurking just out of sight. She was closing in on the truth, but at what cost? And just as she was about to leave the diner, her phone buzzed again. It was a call from Stevens. "Clara, we need to talk. You're in more danger than you realize." The urgency in his voice sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. The walls were closing in, and Clara understood. She was not just chasing after the truth. She was now entangled in a darker narrative where every revelation could lead to peril. She steeled herself for what lay ahead. The confrontation with the judge was imminent, but Clara knew that the path to justice would be fraught with treachery. The shadows were growing longer, and she was determined to face them head-on. Clara's heart raced as she stepped outside the diner, the cool night air enveloping her like a shroud. The weight of Stephen's warning lingered in her mind, amplifying her sense of urgency. She glanced around, scanning the dimly lit street for any sign of danger. The world felt different now, as if it had shifted on its axis, revealing layers of deception she had never before considered. Arriving home, Clara entered the quiet space that had once been filled with laughter and warmth. Now it felt like a tomb, haunted by unanswered questions and the spectre of her husband's absence. She sat at the kitchen table, the stack of photographs spread before her like pieces of a shattered puzzle. Each image held a story, but the connections remained elusive, taunting her with their obscurity. As Clara sifted through the photos, one particular image caught her attention. It was a snapshot of her husband with a group of men, their faces obscured, but their camaraderie evident. She noticed a familiar name scrawled on the back, a name she recalled from their past, the same name that had surfaced in her conversations with Stevens. It was a name that stirred a deep sense of unease within her. Determined to uncover the truth, Clara reached for her laptop. Hours slipped by as she delved into research about the man whose name had haunted her thoughts. What she discovered sent chills down her spine. This man, once a friend of her husband, had connections to shady dealings that extended far beyond their hometown. Clara's fingers trembled as she uncovered reports of illicit activities and ties to powerful figures. With each piece of information, the web of conspiracy grew more tangled, and Clara's resolve solidified. She had to confront the judge, but she needed to gather more evidence, something that would make the authorities take her seriously. As she formulated a strategy, a sense of dread settled over her. The deeper she ventured into this rabbit hole, the more she felt the pull of darkness surrounding her. The following day, Clara found herself standing outside the judge's office, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been building toward. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage, and stepped inside. The judge was seated behind his desk, a knowing smile playing on his lips as he glanced up. "Clara, what a surprise," he said, his voice smooth and disarming. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Clara's throat felt tight as she fought to maintain her composure. "I have questions. About my husband, about the photos, about everything." The judge leaned back in his chair, an expression of feigned innocence crossing his face. "You're still fixated on that old case? You know how these things go. Sometimes people just vanish." But Clara was undeterred. "I know there's more to the story. I've found things that connect you to his disappearance." The judge's demeanor shifted subtly, his smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. "You should be careful, Clara. Digging too deep can lead to unforeseen consequences." The warning hung in the air like a thundercloud, heavy with unspoken threats. Clara sensed the tension escalating, but she pressed on. "I won't back down. I need to know the truth." As their eyes locked, a silent battle unfolded. Clara could see the flicker of something dangerous behind the judge's calm exterior. She was playing a perilous game, and with every passing moment, the stakes grew higher. Just then, Clara's phone buzzed in her pocket, the sound slicing through the charged atmosphere. She glanced down at the screen, her stomach dropping. It was Stevens, and the message read, "Meet me. Now. We have a problem." Clara's instincts flared. Whatever she had unearthed was more dangerous than she had anticipated. She had ventured into a world of shadows, and the deeper she went, the more perilous her situation became. With resolve, she turned to leave, but the judge's voice stopped her. "Clara, you don't know what you're getting into," he called after her, the underlying threat unmistakable. As she stepped back into the daylight, Clara felt the weight of his words settle over her. The truth was closer than ever, but so too was the danger. She was running out of time, and with each tick of the clock, the darkness loomed larger on the horizon. Clara hurried to her car, the urgency of Stephen's message propelling her forward. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. She could feel the judge's warning reverberating in her thoughts as she navigated through the traffic, urgency gripping her heart. Arriving at the designated meeting spot, a secluded diner at the edge of town, Clara spotted Stevens leaning against the entrance, his face taut with concern. As she approached, his eyes darted around, scanning the surroundings as if anticipating an unwelcome visitor. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, pulling her aside. "I've received some intel that complicates things." "What do you mean?" Clara asked, her pulse quickening. "What's going on?" Stevens hesitated, looking around once more before lowering his voice. "I spoke to an old friend in the department. There have been whispers, rumors about the judge's connections, and they aren't good." Clara's heart sank. "What kind of connections?" "Let's just say the judge isn't just a respected figure in the community. There's talk of a deeper involvement in criminal activities, things that could tie back to your father's disappearance." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "You're saying he could be involved?" "Possibly," Stevens replied, his expression grave. "But it's all circumstantial. I need you to be careful. We can't confront him directly without solid evidence. If he senses we're onto him, it could get dangerous." Clara's determination hardened. "I can't just back off now. I'm so close to uncovering the truth. I won't let fear dictate my actions." "Your safety is my priority," Stevens urged, his tone firm. "We need a plan. If we're going to dig deeper, we have to do it smart." Clara nodded, steeling herself against the rising tide of anxiety. They spent the next hour strategizing, reviewing everything they had learned so far. Each detail, every piece of evidence, was a crucial thread in the fabric of the mystery surrounding her father's disappearance. As they plotted their next steps, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced out the diner's window, and for a fleeting moment she thought she caught a glimpse of the judge's car parked across the street. The thought sent shivers down her spine, but she pushed it aside. Later that night, Clara couldn't sleep. The faces of her family haunted her thoughts, each one searching for closure, for answers that had long eluded them. She remembered her father's dog tags, the significance they held, and how the judge had reacted when they were mentioned. Clara opened her laptop, determined to follow the trail one more time. Hours slipped by as she scoured old articles, police reports, and any public record she could find. Just as she was about to call it a night, a familiar name appeared on the screen, one that connected the dots between the judge and a series of unsolved cases spanning decades. Her heart raced as she clicked through the links, each article uncovering a deeper network of corruption and deceit. Clara's breath quickened as she uncovered a chilling detail. The judge had presided over numerous cases involving missing persons, many of whom had ties to local gangs. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but with each revelation, Clara felt the weight of the danger surrounding her tighten its grip. She knew she was nearing the heart of the truth, but she also sensed that the closer she got, the more perilous her quest would become. As the clock ticked closer to dawn, Clara steeled herself for what lay ahead. The stakes had never been higher, and the looming threat of the judge was now more real than ever. She needed to expose the truth before it was too late, before the shadows engulfed her completely. As the first light of dawn broke through her window, Clara felt a surge of determination mixed with dread. She had stumbled upon a web of intrigue that reached far beyond her father's disappearance. The judge's connections, veiled in secrecy, hinted at a larger conspiracy that could implicate powerful figures in the community. Each article she had read unearthed not just the crimes, but also the lives that had been shattered, families like hers, left without answers. Days turned into weeks as Clara dug deeper, her nights spent in front of the screen, fueled by a relentless quest for justice. She reached out to former detectives, journalists who had covered the stories, even family members of other victims, each conversation reinforcing her belief that she was onto something monumental. But with every new lead came an unsettling realization. The longer she pursued the truth, the more isolated she felt. Those who had once supported her now appeared distant, their faith in the justice system shaken by the revelations she shared. Yet, Clara pressed on, driven by the ghosts of the past. She began to connect with others who had lost loved ones, forming a small network that shared her urgency and desperation. It was during one of these meetings that Clara received an anonymous tip. A shadowy figure had information that could expose the judge's darkest secrets. They arranged to meet in a secluded area, the tension palpable as Clara approached the designated spot. The air was thick with foreboding, her instincts screaming that this could be a trap. As Clara arrived, her heart pounded in her chest. She scanned the surroundings, every rustle of leaves or distant sound igniting her anxiety. Just as she began to doubt the meeting would happen at all, a figure emerged from the shadows. The individual, cloaked in a hooded jacket, revealed themselves as a former court clerk who had seen things no one should ever witness. With a shaky voice, the clerk shared harrowing tales of the judge's misconduct, of cases swept under the rug, of threats made to keep silence, and of missing persons linked to the judge's illicit dealings. Each revelation added weight to Clara's already heavy heart, but before she could ask for more details, the clerk glanced over their shoulder, panic flashing across their face. "Get out of here," the clerk warned, urgency lacing their words. "They're watching." Instinctively, Clara turned to leave, her pulse racing. But as she did, she caught a glimpse of a black SUV idling at the end of the street, the silhouette of a figure inside watching her. Her stomach dropped as the reality of her situation sank in. She was being hunted. Her mind raced as she returned home, strategizing her next move. The judge was not just a figure of authority, he was a key player in a sinister game that involved lives and livelihoods. Clara knew she had to act swiftly. She couldn't let fear dictate her course. That night she prepared a detailed dossier of everything she had uncovered, the articles, the testimonies, and now the clerk's claims. Clara's plan was clear. She would take her findings to a trusted investigative journalist who had a reputation for exposing corruption. With their help, she could shine a light on the dark corners that had long been ignored. But as she sat at her desk, assembling the evidence, a chill swept over her. She felt as though unseen eyes were watching, the very shadows she had been trying to illuminate closing in around her. In the depths of her mind, she understood that her pursuit of justice could lead to a confrontation that would forever change her life. With every passing moment, Clara felt the weight of her father's dog tags pressing against her heart, a reminder of what was at stake. She was not just fighting for answers, she was fighting for her family, for all the families shattered by the judge's actions, and for the truth that had been buried for far too long. The next step in her investigation could unveil the twisted reality behind her father's disappearance, but it could also put her directly in the crosshairs of those who wished to keep the past buried. In the quiet of her room, Clara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The darkness would not silence her. It was time to confront the shadows. Clara knew that the next phase of her investigation demanded courage and tact. She began by reaching out to the former colleagues of the judge, hoping to uncover any lingering whispers that might lead her closer to the truth. Many were hesitant to speak, their loyalties ingrained from years of service and fear of reprisal. But Clara pressed on, determined to reveal the web of deceit that had ensnared her father's life. She dug through old newspapers, searching for articles that may have mentioned the judge's cases, his decisions and his associations. With each page she turned, Clara felt a mix of dread and determination. The more she learned, the clearer it became that the judge's reputation was not one of mere authority. It was soaked in shadows, riddled with allegations that hinted at a darker side. Rumors of backdoor deals, unreported incidents, and a network of influence began to surface, painting a picture of a man who wielded his power with impunity. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place, Clara reached a critical juncture. She discovered that there had been a case involving a missing veteran around the time her father disappeared, a case that had been quietly closed with little fanfare. The name of the veteran rang a bell, as if it had been etched in her memory. She quickly connected the dots, realizing this veteran had served alongside her father. With this new lead, Clara felt a rush of adrenaline. Could it be that her father's disappearance was tied to this other veteran? What secrets had the judge been protecting? She began piecing together the timeline, identifying connections between the judge, the veteran, and her father. Her heart raced as she found herself on the precipice of discovery, yet a gnawing anxiety settled in her stomach. One night, as she reviewed her findings, a knock echoed through her home, jolting her from her thoughts. Clara opened the door to find a stranger, an older man with weary eyes. He introduced himself as a former investigator who had worked on her father's case but had been silenced. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air as he revealed that he had uncovered evidence that implicated the judge in a cover-up that had cost lives. Clara's mind raced, grappling with the implications of this revelation. The judge wasn't just a powerful figure. He was a man deeply involved in a sinister conspiracy that had led to her father's disappearance. As the investigator shared his knowledge, Clara felt the walls closing in, the shadows of the past beginning to take shape. But she knew that the truth must be confronted. The time for whispers and shadows was over. With this newfound information, Clara realized she had reached a pivotal moment. She could either choose to escalate her investigation, risking everything, or pull back and protect herself from potential retaliation. As dawn broke, illuminating her cluttered desk, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. She would not turn back. It was time to gather her courage and confront the judge, to demand answers that had been denied for far too long. The stage was set, and the truth loomed just beyond reach, waiting for her to take the next step into the darkness. Clara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The judge, a figure draped in respectability, now loomed as a central character in a story laced with deception and treachery. She knew that to confront him would mean stepping into a world fraught with danger, but the truth about her father's fate was her only compass. Clara spent the morning poring over old newspaper articles, piecing together snippets of information that could serve as her armor. The judge had a reputation for being untouchable, a revered figure in the community whose influence extended far beyond the courtroom. Yet a crack in that facade had begun to form, and she intended to exploit it. With each detail she uncovered, the intensity of her resolve grew. Clara learned of the judge's ties to a secretive network that had thrived on manipulation and control. His connection to her father was deeper than anyone had ever realized, a connection tangled in betrayal and lost loyalties. She reached out to former colleagues of her father, desperately searching for anyone who might have known something, anything that could further unravel the web of secrecy. As the sun dipped low in the sky, Clara's phone buzzed with a message from one of her father's old friends. They had agreed to meet in a dimly lit cafe, a place where secrets felt safer. Clara arrived, her heart racing with anticipation. The friend, an elderly man with haunted eyes, recalled the days when her father had spoken out against the corruption that festered within the local government. He revealed that her father had discovered something explosive, something that had put him squarely in the crosshairs of powerful men. Clara's pulse quickened as she learned that her father had been collecting evidence, files that could dismantle the very system that had betrayed him. This information was a double-edged sword. It painted a clearer picture of the threats her father faced, but it also hinted at a darker reality, that those who had silenced him would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Fueled by a mix of fear and determination, Clara prepared herself for the confrontation. She knew she would need a plan, a way to approach the judge that would ensure her safety while still demanding the truth. She reached out to the investigator, who had first alerted her to the judge's involvement, seeking advice on how to navigate this perilous path. The investigator urged caution, but recognized the need for confrontation. Together, they devised a strategy that would allow Clara to catch the judge off guard, to force him to respond to her allegations without the benefit of preparation. As night fell, Clara found herself standing outside the judge's imposing residence, a place that had once seemed synonymous with justice. Now, it felt like a fortress cloaked in shadows. Her heart pounded in her chest as she prepared to knock on the door, the weight of her father's memory guiding her hand. But just as she raised her fist, the front door swung open, revealing the judge, a man seemingly untouched by time, yet now cloaked in suspicion. Clara's breath caught in her throat. This moment, this confrontation, was the culmination of years of grief and determination. She stepped forward, ready to demand answers, ready to unveil the hidden truths that had long been buried. The judge's eyes narrowed as he recognized her, and in that instant Clara knew there was no turning back. The game was afoot, and with it came the chilling realization that the truth was about to collide with a web of lies that threatened to ensnare them both. Clara took a deep breath, her voice steady yet filled with emotion as she confronted the judge. "I know what happened to my father," she declared, her words echoing in the stillness of the night. The judge's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before being replaced by a practiced calm. "Your father?" he replied, feigning ignorance. "I don't believe we've met, Miss—" "Clara," she interrupted, her resolve firm. "Clara Johnson, the daughter of James Johnson, the veteran who disappeared in 1982. You have his dog tags, don't you?" The air thickened with tension as the judge's eyes darkened. Clara could see the gears turning in his mind, calculating his next move. She pressed on, her voice rising slightly, fueled by years of pent-up anguish. "You were the last person to see him. You know what happened that night." For a moment, silence enveloped them, broken only by the distant sounds of the night. The judge's facade cracked just enough for Clara to sense the truth simmering beneath the surface. He stepped back, gesturing for her to enter, a calculated move that suggested he was not willing to engage in this confrontation on the doorstep. Inside, the dimly lit room felt stifling, decorated with the trappings of a life steeped in power and privilege. Clara's heart raced as she surveyed the surroundings, her mind racing with questions. The judge motioned for her to take a seat, his demeanor shifting as he donned the mask of a concerned elder. "You've been misled, Clara," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "People talk. Rumors are dangerous. Your father was a troubled man and—" "A troubled man?" Clara interrupted, her anger flaring. "He was a hero. He fought for this country and came home to a community that failed him. You know that better than anyone." The judge's expression darkened, revealing a glimpse of the man behind the mantle of authority. "There are things you don't understand, things that are better left alone. Your father was involved in something much bigger than you know." Clara felt a chill run down her spine, his words laced with the threat of secrets long buried. "You need to tell me the truth," she demanded, her determination unwavering. What really happened to him? His silence spoke volumes, and as the gravity of the moment settled in, Clara realized the depth of the danger she was in. This was no longer just a quest for answers. It was a descent into a dark world of betrayal, where her father's disappearance was just a piece of a much larger puzzle. The judge leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You should walk away while you still can, Clara. Some truths are not meant to be uncovered." But Clara stood her ground, the spirit of her father emboldening her. "I won't rest until I find out what you're hiding. You're the only one who can answer my questions." The tension between them crackled in the air, an invisible thread binding their fates together. Clara's heart raced as she sensed she was on the precipice of a revelation that could change everything. But the judge, with his years of experience in manipulating truth, was not about to let her walk away unscathed. As she prepared to press him for more answers, a sudden noise from outside broke the moment. A vehicle's headlights pierced through the window, illuminating the room in a stark contrast to the shadows that cloaked their conversation. The judge's eyes widened for a brief moment, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "We're not finished here," Clara insisted, her pulse quickening. But just as she prepared to demand more, the door swung open, revealing an unexpected visitor. The investigator, arriving with an urgency that hinted at new developments. The tension in the room shifted, and Clara knew that the confrontation was only just beginning. The truth was waiting to be unveiled, but danger lurked around every corner, threatening to ensnare her in a web of deceit that had kept her father's secrets hidden for far too long. The investigator stepped into the room, breathless, a sense of urgency etched across his face. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, his voice low but steady. The weight of his words hung in the air, amplifying the tension that had already gripped the room. "What is it?" Clara asked, her mind racing with the implications of his arrival. Had he found something? Was this the breakthrough she had been hoping for? "There's been a development in the case," he began, glancing briefly at the judge, who was now shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "We received a tip-off about a location tied to your father's disappearance. It's not far from where his dog tags were discovered." Clara's heart quickened. The prospect of a lead sent a rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Where? What do you mean tied to his disappearance?" "There's an abandoned building just outside town, a place known for illicit activities. We believe your father may have been seen there around the time he vanished," the investigator explained, his expression grave. Clara's mind raced with images of her father, a man who had fought for his country, now potentially caught in a web of danger. "We have to go there," she insisted, determination flooding her voice. The investigator hesitated. I need you to understand, Clara. This isn't just about finding answers. There could be risks involved. This judge, he's connected. He's not just any ordinary citizen. The judge's demeanor shifted. He leaned forward slightly, his expression hardened. You shouldn't get involved in something you don't understand, Clara. Some things are better left buried. Her resolve only strengthened at his warning. She had spent years seeking the truth, and she refused to be intimidated now. You don't get to decide what I can handle, she shot back. I have to know what happened to my father. The investigator nodded slowly, sensing the gravity of the moment. All right, but we need to approach this carefully. I'll gather a team, and we'll head to the location together. If your father was there, we need to uncover what happened. The judge's eyes narrowed, a flicker of concern passing over his features. You're making a mistake, Clara. Sometimes the past is best left untouched. Ignoring his warning, Clara felt a surge of purpose. This was a chance to find the answers she had long sought, to finally piece together the puzzle of her father's mysterious disappearance. But as she stood there, the weight of the judge's gaze bore down on her, a reminder that some secrets were meant to stay hidden, at least in the eyes of those who wished to protect them. As they prepared to leave, the air thick with anticipation, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of unearthing something far darker than she had ever imagined. The shadows of the past loomed large, ready to reveal truths that could shatter the fragile sense of security she had clung to for so long. With every step toward the abandoned building, she felt the gravity of her decision. She was walking into the heart of a mystery that spanned decades, a mystery intertwined with the very man who had once promised her safety and protection. Clara knew she was about to confront the hidden layers of her father's life, and perhaps the judge's as well. And as the investigator led the way, Clara steeled herself for whatever awaited them in the darkness, knowing that the truth, however painful, was worth every risk. The dilapidated structure loomed ahead, its weathered walls echoing the whispers of those who had once walked its halls. Clara felt her pulse quicken as they approached the entrance, each footstep amplifying the mix of fear and resolve within her. The investigator paused, glancing back at her, his expression a silent affirmation of the gravity of their mission. Inside, the air was thick with dust and disuse. Sunlight filtered through shattered windows, casting eerie patterns across the floor. Clara's heart raced as memories of her father flickered in her mind. His laughter, the stories he told, the unwavering love he had given her. But this place was a stark reminder of the void left by his absence, a void that had swallowed decades of her life. As they ventured deeper into the building, the investigator began to point out details that had escaped Clara's notice. A faded photograph clung to the wall, a snapshot of a different time featuring men in uniform, soldiers who had once served together. Among them, Clara recognized a face that mirrored her father's features, a man whose story had seemingly intertwined with the past they were now unraveling. "What do you think this means?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It could indicate a connection," he replied, scanning the room for more clues. "Perhaps even a network of those who knew your father." The investigator's words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Clara's mind raced with questions. Had her father confided in others? Were they aware of the circumstances surrounding his disappearance? Just then, a glint of metal caught her eye beneath a pile of debris. Clara knelt down, brushing away the dirt to reveal a small, tarnished badge. It bore the emblem of law enforcement, one that was familiar yet unsettling. Her heart sank as she recognized it. It belonged to a man who had once been a close associate of the judge. "What's that?" the investigator asked, stepping closer. "This badge, it belongs to Officer Malone," Clara stammered, memories flooding back of whispered conversations and an unsettling tension surrounding the judge's relationship with the local police. As the realization settled in, Clara's mind began to connect the dots. Officer Malone had been a figure of authority, a man whom she had trusted as a child. But now, with the judge's dark past surfacing, Clara couldn't help but wonder if their bond extended beyond mere acquaintance. The investigator studied the badge, a furrow creasing his brow. "This complicates things," he murmured, the weight of the discovery dawning on him. If Malone was involved, it might imply a cover-up, one that protects certain individuals at the expense of justice. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. The very foundation of her search was beginning to crack, and the shadows of conspiracy were creeping closer. She knew the risks of confronting someone like the judge, a man who had wielded power in the community for years, but the thought of leaving the truth buried beneath the weight of silence was intolerable. As they continued to sift through the remnants of the past, Clara's resolve hardened. She would not be deterred by fear. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was one she had never anticipated. Time was running short. With the judge's arrest looming and the implications of Officer Malone's involvement growing clearer, Clara understood that she was racing against a clock that held secrets waiting to be unveiled. Each discovery pointed to a complex web of deceit, a dark reality that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew. Yet as they prepared to leave the building, Clara felt a shift in the air. Somewhere hidden in the shadows lay the answers she sought, the truth that could either lead to justice or bury her deeper in despair. The confrontation was approaching, and with it, the revelation of a harrowing secret that could change everything. As Clara exited the building, her mind was a torrent of thoughts, each one more disturbing than the last. The arrest of the judge had sent shockwaves through the community, but what Clara understood was that this was only the beginning. She had unearthed a sliver of truth, yet the full extent of the darkness remained obscured, lurking just beyond her reach. Her heart raced as she recalled the chilling implication of the dog tags. They were not merely a relic from the past. They were a key that could unlock the door to a nightmare. Clara felt an urgency to connect the dots, to dive deeper into the labyrinthine relationships that surrounded the judge and Officer Malone. She knew she had to act fast before the truth could slip through her fingers once again. She turned to the small team of investigators and volunteers who had rallied around her cause, their dedication unwavering. They set up a meeting that evening, determined to piece together the fragments of evidence they had collected. Each detail mattered, and Clara encouraged her team to bring forth any leads, no matter how inconsequential they seemed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the conference room, Clara's thoughts wandered to the judge's past. She had heard whispers of his connections to powerful figures, those who operated in the shadows. Would they protect him, even in the face of overwhelming evidence? She could not allow fear to dictate her actions. Instead, she harnessed it, transforming it into fuel for her quest. The meeting began with a sense of purpose. As they reviewed surveillance footage from the day the judge was arrested, Clara's heart sank. There in the background of a grainy clip was a figure she recognized, a man who had frequented the judge's social gatherings, someone tied to a small group of individuals with questionable intentions. Could he be involved in the same web of deceit that had ensnared her family? As discussions progressed, Clara's instincts told her they were inching closer to a critical revelation. The pieces began to align, revealing a broader conspiracy that implicated not just the judge, but possibly a network of those who had long since evaded scrutiny. It became evident that the disappearance of her loved one was not just a personal tragedy. It was entwined with a greater, more sinister narrative that threatened to engulf them all. Clara's determination solidified as she prepared for the next steps. She would not be silenced. She would confront the judge, demand answers, and expose the truth that had been hidden for far too long. The risk was monumental, but the stakes were higher. She felt a wave of clarity wash over her. This was no longer just about finding her father. It was about justice for every victim lost in the shadows of power. As they wrapped up the meeting, Clara could feel the weight of the approaching confrontation pressing down on her. The time for action was now, and she knew the truth was within her grasp. The path ahead would be fraught with danger, but she had come too far to back down. With each heartbeat, the urgency intensified, and as she walked out into the night, she felt the chilling embrace of a reality that was about to explode into chaos. The confrontation awaited her, and with it, the potential for a harrowing twist that could alter everything she had ever known. As Clara stood before the judge, the room felt suffocating. Her heart raced, but she drew strength from the memories of her father, the laughter they shared, and the promise she made to find him. The judge listened, initially skeptical, But as Clara laid out the evidence she had painstakingly gathered, a palpable shift occurred. The walls of indifference began to crack. Days later, law enforcement launched a renewed investigation. The truth, once buried under layers of deceit, began to unravel. With each revelation, Clara learned of the web of corruption that extended far beyond her father's disappearance. Influential figures were implicated, their lives entangled in a dark underbelly of greed and betrayal. Then came the moment of reckoning. Clara found herself in a tense confrontation with one of the culprits, a trusted family friend who had turned out to be a key player in the crime. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the facade shattered. The confession poured out, a chilling admission of betrayal, revealing that her father had stumbled upon a dangerous secret, one that put his life at risk. Clara's pursuit of truth had not only uncovered the story of her father, but also exposed a network of injustice that had long evaded scrutiny. The ensuing legal battle brought some semblance of justice as those responsible faced the consequences of their actions. Yet as Clara stared at the gavel falling in the courtroom, she felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but the scars of loss remained. In the aftermath, Clara reflected on her journey. The quest for truth had transformed her, igniting a passion for justice that would never dim. She realized that loss is not just about what is taken from us. It also illuminates the paths we choose to confront the shadows. Each revelation brought her closer to understanding not just her father's fate, but also the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable darkness. As the dust settled, Clara found herself at her father's grave, the weight of grief mingling with a profound sense of purpose. She whispered promises to keep fighting for those who could not fight for themselves, to be a voice for the silenced. And in that moment she understood, truth may be painful, but it is also the first step toward healing. The echoes of her father's laughter lingered in her heart, a reminder that while some doors may close, others open to reveal new beginnings. Clara's journey would not end here. She would continue to seek justice for herself, for her father, and for every victim lost in the shadows. In a world where darkness can loom large, Clara's story is a testament to the power of persistence and the unyielding hope that one voice can ignite change. What will you do when faced with your own shadows?